Jai Shri Radhe. Today is the 47th day of our readings, and we are in the middle of the story of Govind Dubey, Varta 34. So we'll start from here today. Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Shri Vallabhadisha ki Jai, Giriraj Dharan ki Jai, Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Part 2. One time Sri Acharyaji travelled from Adel to Dwarka. He went via Gujarat. Govind Dubey, Jagannath Joshi and 5 or 7 other Vaishnavas accompanied him. When they arrived in Dwarka, Govind Dubey asked Sri Acharyaji to speak about the Lord. Sri Mahaprabhuji agreed but said he did not have the time right then and that he would start the story when he did have the chance. The reason for this is that Govind Dubeyji was not related to the Vraja Leela, but Sri Mahaprabhuji wanted to speak of the Vraja Leela. Therefore he said that he did not have time. Part 2 continued. Govind Dubey begged him to just say a little. Then Sri Acharyaji opened up his book and began to speak. At that very moment, Sri Ranchor Lalji came there and began to chat to Govind Dubey, who became completely lost in the conversation. He forgot that Sri Acharyaji was even speaking, otherwise how could he listen to his lord? Sri Acharyaji asked Govind Dubey to tell him which story he had been telling, but then, when he turned his head, he saw that Govind Dubey was speaking to Sri Ranchor Lalji. Sri Acharyaji closed the book and, very annoyed with Govind Dubey, went off to take rest. The next morning, when Sri Acharyaji had cooked, offered and accepted back the prasad, Mahaprasad, he told his valet, Kawas, closest Vaishnav, Krishnadas Megan, to never give his leftovers to any Vaishnava except Damodar Das Harsani and himself. Up to this time, it was the usual practice for Vaishnavas to take Sri Mahaprabhuji's leftovers before the prasad that they themselves had cooked. Krishnadas Megan did exactly as guided. Only he and Damolaji took Sri Acharyaji's leftovers. They gave none away. The next day, Sri Acharyaji went to have the sight of Sri Ranachor Lalji. Sri Ranachor Lalji said, "Yesterday you did not give prasad to any Vaishnavas. They were hungry. Please give your leftovers to them as you always have up till now." Bhav Prakash, the inner meaning. Sri Ranachor Lalji reasoned, if Govind Dubey hears the Vraja pastimes from Sri Acharyaji, he will become absorbed in them and I will lose him. That is why he engaged Govind Dubey in his own story. When one is speaking and someone else is talking at the same time, it is very annoying, like biting into the stone in the middle of some lovely tasty eatables. When recounting the Lord's pastimes and others talking is irritating. Therefore Sri Acharyaji was unhappy and his loving mood became concealed. Govind Dubey was not listening to him, so the mood that had arisen was broken. Therefore he closed his book and went to take rest. There is another way to look at this. After all, Sri Ranachor Lalji would not interrupt Sri Acharyaji. It was, in fact, Sri Govardhanathji himself who, thinking that Sri Acharyaji might reveal too many details about his personal pastimes, and that a devotee of his kingly pastimes was sitting in the front row, made Sri Ranachor Lalji chat to Govind Dubey to stop him from hearing the things he was not qualified to hear. This is why Sri Ranachor Lalji asked Sri Acharyaji the next day why he was annoyed with the Vaishnavas and thus he had not fed them the Mahaprasad. All of this happened simply by the wish of Sri Govardhanathji. It was not me, said Ranachor Lalji. Please continue to give the Vaishnavas the Mahaprasad plate. Part 2 continued. Sri Acharyaji went to the Vaishnavas' tent and asked them why they had not had prasad the previous day. They replied that since they had not been given his leftovers, none of them had taken any prasad at all. Sri Acharyaji replied, I would not give you the Mahaprasad, but a request has come to me from on high, and so I will give you from now on. Bhav Prakash. He was telling them that they had done nothing wrong, but the instructions had come from the Lord himself, and that is why he had withheld the prasad. The Vaishnavas pleaded, We are all the servants of your lotus feet. You will only ever do what is good for us. Sri Acharyaji told Krishnadas Megan to now again give the Mahaprasad to the Vaishnavas as before. He did just that. They all partook of the prasad. Sri Acharyaji returned to Adel after some time, having taken his leave of Sri Ranachor Lalji. The Vaishnavas all accompanied him to Adel. After reaching there, they went back to their respective homes. After having bowed low to Sri Acharyaji, Govind Dubey returned to his home in Keralu. Bhav Prakash. Sri Acharyaji distributed his prasad because the Lord told him so. However, whilst there was a question of Govind Dubey being there, he did not discuss any of the Lord's pastimes because when the listener is not qualified to hear, the mood is lost. Sri Govind Dubey once went to Mirabai's house. He stayed there for some days discussing the Lord's pastimes with her. Sri Gosaiji came to hear that his father's disciple was there and discussing with her. Sri Gosaiji wrote down one Sanskrit verse and sent one Vrajavasi to give it to Govind Dubey. Its purpose was that if one is used to sitting on an elephant, then why should one take to riding a donkey? For as long as one should live, if one has smelt the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet, then why resort to scent, perfume? Why would one need to take refuge, taste, and any other flavour or place one's love elsewhere? Even if one has to suffer one's whole life long, one should never need to reach out to anywhere else. Bhagavat pada padma paraga yuto nahi yukta taram maranepi taram itara shrayanam gajaraja gato nahi rasa bhamapyurari kurute. If one is used to sitting on an elephant, then why should one take to riding on a donkey? For as long as one should live, if one has smelt the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet, then why resort to scent? Why would one need to take refuge, taste any other flavour, or place one's love elsewhere? Even if one has to suffer one's whole life long, one should never need to reach out to anywhere else. Bhagava Bhava Prakash. In other words, when you are a disciple of Sri Acharyaji, why do you need to go to Mirabai to discuss the Lord's pastimes? That is like swapping the horse for a donkey, or the elephant for a donkey. Part 3 continued. The Vrajavasi delivered this letter into Govind Dubey's hand. At that time, Govind Dubey was sitting by the lake outside the village performing his evening prayers. When he received it, he immediately took his belongings from Mirabai's house and left from there. Mirabai tried hard to discourage him, but he left without saying a word. He came to Sri Gosaiji and bowed to him. Sri Gosaiji told him never to discuss the principles of Sri Acharyaji's path with anyone not on the path of grace. Govind Dubeji took his advice and returned home. Bhava Prakash. The thing is that Govind Dubey's mind often wandered here and there. Sri Gosaiji did not want other Vaishnavas to follow his lead, otherwise they would not receive the fruit of their own path. Govind Dubey was related to the Dwarka Leela and he knew nothing else. However, Sri Gosaiji needed to instruct the other Vaishnava devotees that to relate to any other path other than Sri Acharyaji's is a great obstruction. Even if someone to insist, they should still not reveal the doctrines of the path. All of this is to keep the path's integrity intact. Govind Dubey did not have the experience of the Vraja mood, therefore he could not be called a pure Pushti Jiva, but he was known as one who follows the path of law, but was influenced by the great grace of Sri Acharyaji. Thus concludes Varta 34, the story of Govind Dubey Sanchora from Keralu, although in truth there is no end to his story. Continuing now with the story of Vraja and Madho Dubey, Varta 35. The story of Vraja and Madho Dubey, Sanchora Brahmins from Mrinanda. These two brothers are each other's Sakhis in the eternal Leela. One is named Kanjari and she is very clever in designing forest bowers. This is Raja Dubey, while the other one is called Rasalika, who is attached to the tasteful essence of the loving mood of the divine couple, just like bees are attracted to sweet fruit juice. She is Madho Dubey. They were both born to a Sanchora Brahmin family. Their father was a very straight and renounced man. He worshipped the Lord according to the rules of the path of lawful limitations. If any saintly being, person, or renunciate were to pass by, then he would feed them before letting them go. He took a lot of care with them. He always stayed awake the whole of the night of the 11th day of the month, Ekadashi. Then the two brothers' parents became sick. They asked their boys to take them to Dwarka to have the sight of Sri Ranchodlalji. The two brothers sat their parents in a palanquin, taking the father's swarup with them. The parents had the sight of Sri Ranchodlalji, and during this time, Sri Acharyaji was also in Dwarka. Both the parents died. Raja and Madho performed their last rites and observed the resulting period of impurity Sutak. They just sat next to the palanquin. They asked from passers-by whether there were any good discourses being held nearby so they could go to listen. This period of impurity is dragging on and on. One Vaishnav told them that Sri Acharyaji was passing through on his Holy Gross pilgrimage and that he gave very beautiful discourses and told them that they could go there any afternoon. The brothers requested that Vaishnava to take them there that afternoon. Thereafter, they would be able to go by themselves. The Vaishnava agreed, and at the right hour he came to fetch them and lead them there. The two of them bowed from a distance and listened from afar. Sri Acharyaji invited them to come forward, but they said they were still in a period of impurity. Sri Acharyaji just said, "You two brothers are eternally pure. Come and sit in front of me. If you want to ask me anything, please do so." The two of them happily moved up to the front. Sri Acharyaji was speaking about the 5th chapter of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the story of the celebration of Sri Krishna's appearance in Vraja. He let them have the direct experience of those pastimes. When the discourse was over, they approached Sri Acharyaji and bowing low to him said, "What to do, O Maharaj? We are impure right now. Otherwise we would ask you to initiate us. Seeing you has fulfilled our lives." Sri Mahaprabhuji replied, "I understand you. You two are my own souls, and I will take you as my disciples when the period of impurity is over. I will be here until then. When your wish has been granted by my accepting you into the path of grace, then I will be moving on somewhere else. But never worry. Take rest in your tent now, and then come back to me at the same time tomorrow." After paying their respects, the two brothers happily returned to their tent. They spent the whole night experiencing the bliss of the birthday celebrations of Sri Krishna. When they awoke, they discussed how satisfied they were and that their whole life was fulfilled. Sri Acharyaji is the Lord himself. In just one day's discourse, he has let us have this experience. In this way, their period of impurity seemed to last an age. On the 11th day, they bathed and were thus pure again. Very early in the morning, they approached Sri Acharyaji and begged him to take them as his disciples. He made them bathe again and then initiated them with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandha. He gave them the order to now serve the Lord. Vraja and Madhu explained to him that their parent Sri Thakurji was with them, but that their parents had now died. "You have graced us. Please tell us how to proceed." Sri Acharyaji told them to bring the Swarupa from their tent. Madhu Dubey went and fetched Sri Thakurji's travelling box. Sri Acharyaji performed the 5 nectar bath and then gave the Sri Thakurji into their responsibility. He instructed them now to forget everything else and develop Nirodha and simply focus on the Lord. The two brothers asked him to exactly explain the nature of Nirodha, the control of the consciousness, into the exclusivity of the Lord's love. Sri Acharyaji taught, Nirodha is of 2 kinds. One is as a practice and one is as a perfected attitude. The first practice is to reel in the mind from all worldly influences until they hold no attraction whatsoever. After that, the only thought in the mind is a deep desire to serve the Lord at all times, to hear of his pastimes and have no other interests. Even if the mind wanders off, it easily comes back into Seva. The understanding develops that taking shelter in the Divine Beloved is the only worthwhile activity. The perfection of Nirodha is when the mind's nature is perfected. It can only willingly go towards Thakurji's contemplation. One might engage in worldly and scriptural activities, but the heart is totally engaged in the Beloved's Lord character and pastimes. The mind cannot go elsewhere. This is the reward category of Nirodha. The reward category of Nirodha. Sadhan Paksh. For that devotee, the multiple joys and sadnesses of the world have no effect, and the heart is immersed in the Lord only. Vraja and Madhu Dubey then addressed Sri Acharyaji. Both of these types of Nirodha are far from our grasp. Therefore, in the same way as you have hoisted us out of the ocean of worldliness, please now grant us some attainment in Nirodha. We can't see any other way for us to reach that state. Seeing the two brothers' humility and their simple characters, Sri Acharyaji read to them the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the canto that engenders Nirodha, and then composed the Nirodha Lakshanam treatise, the nature of Nirodha, and taught it to them. He blessed them to gain perfect Nirodha and then gave them the water which had touched his feet. At that very second their minds became fixed on the devotional plane. They began to experience the bliss of devotional love. Sri Acharyaji then instructed them to go home. Those whose hearts have become attached to the beloved do not speak a lot or travel a lot. Go home and initiate any divine souls who may also come there. Your Nirodha is perfected. Anyone who also becomes attached to your company will also attain this platform. The two brothers donated whatever wealth they had with them to Sri Acharyaji, took his leave and left Dwarka. They arrived back in Mrinanda and began to serve there Sri Thakurji at home. They had a little wealth saved up at home and they survived on that. They did not talk a lot and they fed and helped anyone who came to them. They remained constantly immersed in the Lord's Leelas. So, Aaj Ke Ananda Ki Jai. Let's glorify the bliss that we have had from reading this story today. We will continue tomorrow with their story, part 1. And जय जय श्री राधे सभी वैष्णवों को सादर हार्दिक सप्रेम जय श्री कृष्ण श्री वल्लभाधीश की जय श्री ब्रजधाम की जय 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 श्री राधे 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 जय हो जी।